Hi all, our instructive game today will have the theme of fixing weaknesses. To demonstrate this theme, I'm going to choose a very high level correspondence game which was played over weeks and months on the chessgames.com site. It was a rest of the world team consultation game, which meant that the members of the team voted their moves and the highest voted move was played. Playing black was ICCF former world champion Jan Timmerman. So the rest of the world team had a lengthy debate and eventually chose d4. And Timmerman responded with the highly aggressive f5, the Dutch defence. And after g3, the team prepared to fianchetto the bishop. So they delayed playing c4, which is more mainstream. And after knight f6, they played bishop g2. g6 was played, indicating the Leningrad Dutch variation of the Dutch defence. This can be a very, very aggressive system, with black playing later for d6, bishop g7 later, queen e8 after black castles and e5. And often, black can develop a very aggressive attack. The world managed to avoid being attacked in this game, and managed to fix Timmerman's weaknesses. So c4 was played, and after bishop g7, knight c3, and after castles, knight f3. So this is a fairly standard position from the Leningrad Dutch variation. And after d6, castles was played. And now Timmerman played c6. So potentially he's anticipating to play, if white plays d5, to play c5, and he'll have a nice grip on d4. Also, potentially, the knight can go to a6 and c7 in some lines, and the queen can still go to queen e8, and then e5, e4 is often very dangerous when faced with the Leningrad Dutch. The team now played perhaps a controversial plan based on a Korchnoi game, which Korchnoi played queen b3, and the idea of this move was to exert immediate pressure on black's queen side, and the queen, although it's at the moment blockading its own pawn, but the b pawn, the queen can go to a3, and b4 and b5 will be quite dangerous. With this queen on a3, it's targeting black's diagonal, and in particular it's hindering if black did play for this queen e8 and e5 plan. d6 would often be weak. It's interesting in this game how Timmerman avoided that classic idea of playing for e5. He played first knight a6, and after rook d1, he played actually simply king h8. So the queen went to a3, so we can see the pressure of the queen on this diagonal, and also white now has b4 and b5 available to start probing the black queen side. Black played knight c7, and now d5 was played. So potentially white is going to put a lot more pressure now with knight d4, or maybe even taken c5. In the game, Timmerman actually played bishop d7. He didn't actually play c5, so he didn't give white any biting opportunities. If he had played c5, then maybe b4 would be a useful move. So bishop d7, rook b1, and now a5 was played. So it seems Timmerman's simply trying to stop b4, and the queen, arguably is potentially misplaced, because white would like to play a3 and b4. So how did the world get out of this predicament? Has the opening gone wrong? Well, this was a difficult position, it seemed. A lot of people had argued that maybe the opening could have been played better. But anyway, what the world did now was fix his weaknesses, fix and create weaknesses. So taking on c6 was the first step for this, and now the powerful move c5. And we'll see later the c5 square played a crucial role in white winning the exchange. After knight e4, the world took on d6 and now encouraged black to play d5 by playing this bishop f4. So the rook and bishop and queen are all kind of justified now, targeting that sensitive d6 square. So here is where the first major weaknesses on the dark squares were created, because after d5, the world simply played the logical, simple positional move, bishop e5. So exchanging off the dark squared bishop means that these dark squares are under greater scrutiny. So rook e8, and now the world took on g7, rook bc1. So we can see that the c5 square is going to be very important, as well as the d4 square. After queen e7, the world wasn't afraid to exchange off queens. This is still a nagging advantage for white. And now the nice move knight a4. So that c5 square has been targeted. After knight b5, knight b6 was played. So simplifying the position a little bit more, but still the nagging pressure on the dark squares persisted, especially with this now strong knight on e5. So after rook d6 f3 to evict the knight on e4, and now a4 was played, and we see that black's position, his pawn structure is kind of frozen, and these weaknesses are very cleverly exploited soon. Bishop f1 helps to reactivate the bishop on this diagonal, so immediately there's a tactical target. After rook e6, f4 was played to secure that knight, allowing also knight e4. But the thing is that this bishop can be used to trade off that knight later, as we'll see. So e3, rook b6, and now bishop d3. So black's best piece is already being challenged, and this pawn is immune. Let's have a quick look. If rook takes b2 here, then takes, and then knight takes c6 is a very big advantage for white. So Timmerman has a very difficult position here after bishop d3. He played knight a6, and here is one of the most surprising moves of the game, exploiting the vulnerability of the c5 square. b4 was played, believe it or not, even though it's defended by 3 pieces, because the idea is to gain access to c5 in a critical knight fork. So after knight takes b4, bishop takes, f takes e4, and now knight d7, and where can the rook go? It only has 2 squares, and either of those squares will result in knight c5, forking both rooks, winning the exchange. So here is where the world had a material advantage. So winning the exchange here, and in this position, after g4, space was gained on the king side, and Timmerman faces now an uphill struggle. Rook c5, rook a7. His pieces are very passive. His knight, is manically trying to defend on this b line. But after h4, white is increasing space and pressure on the king side. So rook a6, rook went back to c1, encouraging now perhaps black into another blunder to leave the knight coming off the b file to go to d3. Because now the rook was able to infiltrate via the b line. So after h5, gh, rook b8, and now the rooks have this entry point, the b file, which was expertly used. So these rooks came round the back, sacrificing the e pawn. Now they're connected, and now the material can be regained here. So just leaving white a clear exchange ahead. So after f6, rook f3, black's position is extremely critical. So rook takes f6, king takes e3, and the rest is really just technique. It's the exchange up now with very little compensation for black. So these were the remaining moves, which are all basically technique for the team. So king e2, and the pawn is going nowhere. So here finally Timmerman resigned. Let's have a quick overview and summary of this game. So it was a Leningrad Dutch, where black tried to avoid the standard template plan of queen e8 and e5, but found his position quite frozen later on, especially after the exchange of the dark squared bishops. The c5 square proved to be a critical weakness, which enabled white to win the exchange with a cunning tactical idea after knight a6 of playing b4. By the way, I didn't mention a takes and then a5 just wins the knight on a6. So whatever way black took here, black was in trouble, losing the exchange. And in this second part of the game, the entry point into the black's position was the b file. So after this knight d3, this enabled white to infiltrate with the rooks and temporarily sacrifice a pawn in the centre, because it was calculated just to regain that pawn, leaving white with the clear exchange up. So a very nicely played game from the world, which they should be justifiably proud, working as a team to overcome a former ICCF world champion. I hope you enjoyed that. Please leave any comments on YouTube. Thanks very much.